Today's encounter will be conducted by Tanmay Nawar and Shah from the fourth year. They recently won the gold and the silver medal respectively at the Asian contest for architectural rookies. This brings together the representative students who are selected from the national competitions across Asia and will be presenting the award-winning entries.
Hi, I'm Shah from the fourth year, and this is Tanmay Nawar. I don't know if I can speak. Anyway, so the Asian contest of architectural rookies basically is this contest that was formulated by what? That was actually formulated as a platform to get kids from all over Asia, all the countries basically in Asia, to come and discuss what architecture is and how they've been taught architecture in the 3 main years of architectural school in their respective countries. So basically every country, so the format of the competition is such that every country basically has like a national or a domestic round within their country, where all the architectural schools are invited to send 2 participants each from every school that come and participate in this competition, and from those are selected 5 people. 2 are gold winners and 3 are silver winners, and the 2 gold winners actually represent that country in the international round that happens in various countries afterwards. So this year is going to be happening in Mongolia, last year happened in Vietnam. So for this competition, PVP College in Pune actually is the host that conducts this competition for the Indian national round, and over 400 architectural colleges are invited for this national round that happens in Pune. So this year, not everybody obviously sends 2 participants, but this year more than 50 colleges sent 2 participants each, and the number that turned out at the end, like after registration, a lot of people cancel obviously, but like at the end the number that turned out as participants was more than 60 people, and from amongst those Tanmay won a gold medal and I won a silver. So basically the format of the competition is such that the project that you've done in either of your semesters in the 3rd year, you're eligible to give that as one of your entries as participation. And so what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to make a 10-slide presentation which actually becomes the basis of where you explain your project from. And there is a panel that needs to be composed of your project and all the drawings that you made for the project. It has to be either 2 A1s or 1 A0. You can choose anyone that you're comfortable with. And a model. So these 3 things are a necessity for the competition. And so basically, like I said, the presentation is the basis of how you explain your project, and then the panels and the models are actually pinned up as an exhibition for everybody to see, and even for the jurors to then kind of take future reference when they are trying to make a decision of who is better than who and make the decision of who is going to be the winner. So there are 3 rounds of marking basically, when they select the top 20 out of the whole lot that comes as participants, then they select the top 10, and then the top 5 are selected. So this happened last month in August in Pune. So I think Tanmay is going to start with this presentation, going to explain to you what this project was about. So both our projects are basically from the 6th semester of 3rd year, and our site was Bhuj, and we were given 3 different sites. Like the entire class was divided into 3 groups and given 3 different sites. One was Lakhpat, which is like a deserted town now in Bhuj, which was supposed to be on the banks of river Indus, but because Indus shifted its course, it became deserted. The second site was the Bunny grassland, which is completely different from what this site, which is Lakhpat, is like. And the third one was the Run of Kutch, which again is a completely different context as to what the other 2 sites are like. So Tanmay's project is in Lakhpat, so he's just going to start with this presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, hello. My name is Tanmay Nawar, and my project's name is Descending Mythologies. It is a museum of mythologies built in a fortified village called Lakhpat. It's in Kutch. The built-up area is 4,000 square meters, and yeah, next. So talking about Lakhpat, Kutch basically it's a desert, and the horizon sets a dead. Basically the desert sets a dead horizon in the landscape. In that dead horizon, there is a fortified village called Lakhpat. Lakhpat was a prosperous trading port earlier, but because of geological shifts and earthquakes, Indus River shifted its course. What happened was then the port lost its importance, and what left was the village inside a fortified inside the fortified walls. The walls became intimidating, and then people had to abandon the place. The houses started converting into ruins. People who lived there adjusted their lives according to the ruins. Children adjusted their playgrounds according to the ruins. Now Lakhpat is famously known as a ghost town, a ghost village. The broken windows and the doors tells you the history of its mythical past. So the entire landscape of Lakhpat is dotted with lot of places and a lot of architectural structures through which you can look at it and conjecture the mythical past. So, for example, like the first image which you see, there's a broken wall where imagine the trading ships would land and where all the trading activity happened. The abandoned stepwell over there must have been a very buzzing place where women would come and fetch water. The structure over there must have been a pavilion where people used to come and park their camels, and basically a recreational space for the villagers. So all these places and conjecturing all those mythical events, I decided that Lakhpat is basically a container which is storing all these mythical stories in it. And all these mythical stories need to be delayered as they have been layered according to the past because of the passing time. With this idea of delayering, the expression chosen on the site was to basically excavate, and the expression was so archaeological that the architecture itself became very monolithic in nature. The first charcoal model which you see symbolizes the idea of delayering something that is dead yet has its physical presence. The further sketches allowed me to explore this idea of a mythical city which then gets formed because of delayering, and then the architecture becomes architecture is so monolithic in nature that it questions questions its existence, and it itself becomes a myth. The further sections allowed me to explore this relationship of the building with the wall, and what happens to the footing of the wall and how the building reacts to the footing of the wall. So somewhere it just becomes like a space where people can sit and it becomes like an amphitheater. Somewhere it just becomes like a mythical chamber where you go down and explore those myths. Somewhere it just becomes like platforms where you view the wall and the wall becomes more intimidating, making you feel as if you are inside that container. Next. So looking at the site, the area where I will build, I chose was at the end of the end where all the
Sorry, I'm so sorry.
Okay, so the site which I chose was basically where all the roads of the villages are merging, and what happens is then the building itself becomes like a part of the village, and it sort of forms like a climax to the entire story. And the building is aligned along the wall so that the people are constantly in relationship with the wall. The material of the building is it's entirely made up of Lakhpat limestone. Basically, it's a commonly available material there, and the fort wall is itself built with that material, and even the houses over there were built of those material. So this helps the building to sort of merge with the surrounding context visually. Yeah. So all the functions. Yeah. So what happens is entire building is basically underground. The only function that is up on the ground is the reception, and it is like a lightweight structure which then becomes like a chhatri, which sort of attracts people and demarcates the entrance of the building. There's a central spine which is maintained, which allows you to descend down the building, and basically the central spine, the courtyards. Each and every courtyard has a water body, and all these kunds are connected to each other through these water channels. So so there's this which sort of disappears and appears at every level. So even the water channels sort of create a parallel narrative into the building which sort of adds on to the mythical experience. Next. So talking about the organization,
the landscape a lot closer and started reading and researching about it, I kind of realized that there are a lot of undulations that are present within this landscape that none of us kind of know about, because all that we've seen in images of whatever that we've been exposed to regarding run has always been a flat image. So these baits basically occur when the monsoon hits, first of all. Secondly, when the water from both the gulfs gushes into the run of Kutch, and sometimes also happens because of the tectonic plate movement. So the scales of the baits kind of form because of all three reasons are very different. So the one that forms because of the water gushing in are smaller baits, whereas the baits that are formed because of the tectonic movement and the movement in land are much larger in scale. So Bunny, like I said, has three kind of geographies, out of which the run is one geography that I looked at very closely. And you can see that there are existing baits that exist in the run of Kutch right now. So there are these two major baits that exist, one of which is called the Khadir bait, which also has Dholavira. So this bait basically is formed over a period of time and has the ruins of Dholavira still on it. So you can kind of access this bait also while crossing over a water body. And you can see these real images of the bait. So this is how the bait looks. So the bait kind of rises up and then dips down again. So it's like a small hillock within this flat landscape, and while all the other grounds are submerged within the water during the 4 months of the rain and the water gushing in, this is the only place or only piece of land where habitation is possible in the entire run of Kutch, although the conditions in the run are extremely extreme. Next. Yeah, so basically how is this bait formed? So when the water gushes in from the gulf, it basically starts pushing the land of the run, and eventually this land gets accumulated along a rock bed, which is like a hard rock strata of the run, and over a period of time, because of this accumulation, it becomes like a small hillock. And a very important characteristic of this bait is that it has a flexure on one side where the rock bed is, so that's a very steep slope, and gradually slopes down into the landscape on the other side. So that is something which I took as a primary clue of how I should start designing my building. And especially the reason I wanted to make my building also as a bait is because, like I said, bait becomes the only piece of land that's actually habitable within the whole of the run of Kutch. And you see a lot of these rabaris who are like the local people in Kutch actually traveling to a lot of these baits during the monsoon with their camels, with their cattle, in search of fodder and in search of shade where they can actually build their houses and live. So that was one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to make the building also into a bait, because although the program was given as that of the astronomical observatory, at the end it still was a habitable space. So there were a few clues that I took from the characteristics of what a bait is like. So one of it is that you find a lot of vegetation which you don't find anywhere else in the run. Secondly, there's presence of fresh water because the water kind of gets filtered out as the land gets pushed, and the water that you find on the surface of the land is completely pure and potable. And the third is basically the presence of people, which you don't find in the extreme conditions of run anywhere else. So these were the three main clues that I took again to kind of design and to formulate of how I wanted my building to be. Next. Because this was a semantic semester, it was very important for us to kind of build an image of the building before actually getting into the nitty-gritties of resolving that building. So what we did as exercises throughout our semester was basically that we came up with postcards of what kind of move we wanted to make on site, whether that was a sensitive move, whether that was like a bold move we wanted to make on site, then come up with monolithic models of what the site conditions were like and how your building responded to that. Because if you have a lot of materials in choice, you'll start differentiating between the materials, but the reason they made us make a monolithic material was because they wanted to see how we kind of respond to the land and then the building coming out of land, or however you wanted to do it. So I kind of tried out a series of things. I wanted to pull out the cracks that happened in run. I wanted to kind of punch into the land, so like some other part of land would come up. So work with all these kind of undulations before I kind of settled down onto one form of how I wanted my bait to be. So those are schematic sections of how I wanted my organization stuff to be, etc., which I'll obviously explain a little later. This is the postcard that we made of how I wanted to pull out the cracks and stuff like that. So we kind of went through a lot of these exercises before actually even getting down to drawing a plan, because it was really important for us to kind of know and kind of have an image of what the building actually looked like within our heads before we actually got down to doing the plan. So the bait that I'm talking about is the bait that I've designed, and it's called a bait and an island of respite for a particular reason. So I'm just going to talk to you about a few elements that I took into consideration while designing this. So the bait that is kind of formed because of the land accumulation and the pushing of land. like I said, the characteristic of the bait is a flexure on one side and gradually sloping land. So what I did was there were a series of walls that were inserted within this bait that went from being really porous and thin to being really rigid and thick, which not only informed the organization of how I wanted my programs to be within this bait, but also informed the movement. Then there were three large courtyards that were set between these walls. These three large courtyards actually housed the elements of respite. One which was the trees, which is shade. One which was water, which was sustenance. And the third which is human habitation. Then there were a series of smaller courtyards that actually acted as either light wells or ventilation shafts, and also became these intimate smaller courtyards where like a group of people could meet, like a small little activity could happen. And also became like individual courtyards for individual rooms, because one of the programs that were to house was like lodging for people that came into this building. Then the elements of respite, which I just spoke about, and the movement basically was designed in a way that the movement happened always along the wall, with just one bypass for you to go from one segment of the wall to the other segment. So that's how movement was designed, and all these then start reflecting in plan. So basically the organization has been done in a way that all the softer, like because this was the softer edge of the land and that was where the flexure was, the main core program actually went right at the back, which is the planetarium and the observatory, because that was the core program. So it went where the rock actually exists in a way. And all the other programs were organized in a way that programs that have only floating populations and not many people housing that program for very long hours actually went where the softer edge of land was, and then eventually kind of became a little harder as and when you went inside the building. Next. So these are the other plans where this was the library. So what I started doing is I actually started experimenting with scooping land, because like when the building is embedded within land, it's very difficult for you to get in light and ventilation. And for an area like Bhuj, which is so hot and humid all the time, it was really important for the rooms to have ample amount of ventilation, which would actually be cool ventilation, not hot air. And obviously because it's a very sensitive climate and site, air conditioning would not be the best move you take. So I tried using these scoops and kind of shafts from top, which actually helped me get light and ventilation into the building. This section that you see here is basically the section of the observatory right at the back. So even here the organization has been done in a way that all the public programs are happening right at the bottom, and then when you ascend up to all the other floors, the programs become semi-public and private, which is where the two satellites have been placed. That is right at the top, which is going to be restricted entry, and in the middle is when you just start kind of having an encounter with the technology that is required to kind of gaze at stars and moons. What is also something that I took into consideration is all the fenestrations that you see on top are all either facing at the rising sun or the setting sun of both the solstice. So basically I looked at the sun path diagram of Bhuj, and according to the directions that came from the sun path diagram is how the orientation of the rock bed, like the shape of the rock bed, and the fenestrations have come from. So every time in the summer solstice and the winter solstice you look, the windows actually frame the rising and the setting sun. So that's how the fenestrations came about. These are the longitudinal sections. So basically you can see like the slope, the gradually sloping land on one side and the rock bed on the other. Here you can see the courtyards, the vegetation there, the water here and the people here. And basically the walls also could be seen in all the sections. So basically the sections were also kind of formulated in a very simple formula, that of kind of soft, medium and hard land, and the tree, and basically revolving around the three main courtyards of respite that I was talking about. Next. So this is how I imagined my building. So the building was purposely placed very far away from where the road is. So every time you walk on the road, you actually just look at the building as being a part of landscape and not something that's built, because I want, like, baits are naturally occurring phenomenons, and I wanted the building also to look that way, not to look something that's built. And I think that is something that actually draws you towards the bait, because the bait is the only kind of piece of land of relief or respite for you in this whole run when you're walking in such hot climate. So that's how I imagined the building to be. So even if you saw the side section earlier, you could actually just see like a small hillock that rose up and then kind of dipped down again in land, and that's how I imagined the building to be. So when you look at the building from the road, you actually just see trees popping out, you see people popping out from all these different kind of scoops and fenestrations. And that is something that I had always imagined my building to be like, not something that's so built that it looks like it's a building on that kind of very under land. It was all naturally ventilated, naturally cool ventilated, and also the water body, like the water courtyard, was positioned in a manner that all the winds that were coming from the southwest would be cooled and then would enter into all these programs. So all the ventilation within the buildings except one or two rooms that actually require air conditioning was completely done naturally. The light was completely drawn in naturally from all the scoops, and all the scoops also became terraces where in the evening when it becomes a lot, like the temperature becomes a lot lesser and becomes like a nice kind of environment for you to kind of come out and look at the run. It kind of provided you views of the entire run from the terrace that you came out to, and actually became like spill out spaces for all the programs. And yeah, so this is how I imagined the building to be like. So just like it's a small hillock within the landscape. Thank you. Yeah, anybody has any questions for any of us?
Thanks a lot for that. All the best to Tanmay. I've heard his Mongolia this thing. Sorry.